Hello, everyone. Thank you for making it to our first event of the semester here, kicking it off. It should be a pretty big semester's worth of events. Um, I haven't even announced it to the general community yet, but we are going to have Pulitzer Prize winner William Kennedy, March 30th, which is a pretty big deal for an institution and program like us, right? So it's nice to be a part of that, and it's nice to start it off with JD Sparrow here, right? So Joanna Davies Sparrow has been writing all her life and has pursued her love of language through degrees in English, Russian, and teaching. And I do want to hear about the Russian degree. Beyond her knowledge and acumen with the written word, she has a diverse range of cultural experiences, having lived in a wide range of circumstances from St. Petersburg, Russia, to Dallas, Texas, and now upstate New York, where she lives with her husband and three young sons. Spero has worked as an actress, yoga instructor, web designer, and freelance writer, while also following in her mother's footsteps in becoming an English teacher, both in high schools and here at the college. She has written and published, by my count, 8 novels addressing various issues and interests, ranging from bullying and violence to cybersecurity and the merging of humankind with its own machines, while asking thought provoking questions like what if Holden Caulfield could have prevented the murder of John Lennon? For all this, she's won or been shortlisted for a number of awards, like the Indie Excellence Award, the Amazon Breakthrough Artist Award, and the Best in Young Adult Literature Award from the Adirondack Center for Writing. Today, we'll learn about the craft of writing and the writing life, and hear a little bit about Hackware, a novel that focuses on the breakdown of the main character Chevy Rose after her partner droid suffers an attack from Russian malware. Without further ado, please help me welcome J.D. Sparrow.
Thank you. Thank you guys for coming. The Writers Project is near and dear to my heart since I stepped in a couple years ago for Kathy McCoy, and I just love this program, and so it's an honor to me to be part of it and kick it off this semester. Um, I have a little stack of books here, so I want to talk. This is the star of the show. This is the book that we're going to talk most about. This is where I'm going to do most of the readings from today, or all my readings from today. But I wanted to just go back a little bit and talk about my writing journey, because I know there are a lot of young writers in the room, so it might be of interest to you just to see how I got from, the very beginning of my writing journey to my most recent publication, Hackware, which is, as Peter suggested, is about how technology can kind of interfere or threaten human relationships, which we'll talk more about in a little bit. But this was inspired by all kinds of new technology, a ransomware attack that actually happened in real life. But kind of coming full circle, my very first book that I ever wrote, I had written, for fun or for just journaling, all my life. However, the very first book I ever wrote was actually was based on technology. So the very first book I ever wrote was, I had worked in the corporate world all through my 20s, and I worked for web design companies. This was when the internet was first invented. I'm dating myself here, but this was the mid to late 90s. I was an English major, and I was working at a web design company building websites for corporate America, for Fortune 500 companies, which is kind of a crazy situation, but it was a crazy time, kind of like right now. Right now, we have this AI bubble, we have this boom, all these companies coming out trying to get a piece of this AI, gold pot, right? And back then, everyone needed a website. Internet was brand new. Everyone needed a website. So a friend of mine and I launched this company. We had Johnson and Johnson as a client, and get this, we had one phone line, and we used it for the phone. We used it for dial-up internet, and we used it for the fax machine. And we launched websites for Johnson and Johnson. So that was my first novel. It was called Giddy Up Startup. and it really is like a timestamp in history. And it's a terrible book. It will never see the light of day. It exists on floppy disks. That's how bad it is or old it is. But it was a great, first book to write because it convinced me that I love to write longer pieces. I love to write stories that have, arcs and, they address certain parts of the human condition. I just was completely hooked, and I knew that it was possible by writing that book. So I quit the corporate America. I'm not going to go through my whole my whole bio, but quit corporate America, went back to grad school, and I became an English teacher, and I taught high school English in Massachusetts. And for the next decade, I wrote 2 more full novels that will never be seen. I call them my tester pancakes. I lovingly refer to them as my tester pancakes. And they both, one of them, I worked on for 8 years, and I finally shelved it, and I cried when I shelved it because I was like, this is just not going to work. It's not going to go anywhere. And now that it's been several years beyond that, I realized that there were, those books that I wrote, there was a purpose to that. I was honing my craft. I was taking writing workshops. I was going to writing conferences. I was learning everything I could about how to write the great American novel. So I don't have regrets, of course, but my very first book that was published, well, it was inspired by this book, Catcher in the Rye. I'm going to read this one. It's a classic. So when I was teaching high school, I had to teach Catcher in the Rye. And when I stopped teaching, we were moving around for my husband's job. We were living in Texas. And this idea, I couldn't shake this idea. And the idea was that if you know about how John Lennon was killed by this man, Mark David Chapman, and he waited at the scene and he gave the cops this book. And he said, I am Holden Caulfield. This is why I shot John Lennon. This is my statement. And I just couldn't stop thinking about that. And so I got this idea for this novel, Catcher's Keeper. And it's about how if Holden Caulfield were a real person and he learned about what was going to happen, learned about what Mark David Chapman was planning to do, would he be able to stop it from happening? So it's a little bit of historical fiction. It's a little bit of a twist on history. And I wrote it, and I was so excited about this. And I worked on it for a long, long time at its different points of views, and it's a little complex. I probably bit off way more than I could chew. And I was really excited to get it out to literary agents and get it published. But unfortunately, it's not really in the public domain, Catcher in the Rye. So, but still, it was such a good, I still believed in the book. So I actually entered this contest, Amazon Breakthrough Novel Award contest, which is a defunct contest. But at the time, I did well with it. I was a finalist in it. So that gave me the validation I needed to self-publish. So I went ahead and did that. And I think probably this is my favorite book out of all of my books. So yay, that was exciting. Okay, so next up. So that book came out, I was 41. My debut novel published when I was 41. So there's no time period on this stuff. That's just a lesson learned, right? Then the next book that came out is Forte. This came out in 2015. This was kind of inspired by the whole young adult fantasy movement. But Twilight came out. Everyone was into vampires. This is not a book about vampires. Don't worry about that. But there's a little hint of magic in here. It's set in the real world, but there's a hint of magic. It's about a young girl who is a piano prodigy, and she comes to this small town, and the high school coach recruits her to play a sport and gives her this magic potion drink, and it makes her a superhuman volleyball player, but then she loses her ability to play the piano. So then she's struggling with this internal conflict, like who am I, and what do I want? And it's a great one. Now this one, since it was published, just a tiny bit of publishing news. The publisher was a small publisher, went out of business, and I got my rights back. So I just recently relaunched it and rebranded it as and renamed it Spike. And I'll talk if you have more questions about the publishing process and how that worked. I could talk for another hour about that, but I think the writing is more fun to talk about. And this is actually a 3-book series. I'm currently right now in the process of rebranding and launching the second book in the series. And this is an extension of that story, same characters. This is a great one too. And it will be called Cadence, and it's going to look a lot like this. And that should be out actually within the next month or two. It's almost ready. My brain is really like in that world right now, so I might accidentally start talking about Sammy instead of Chevy. So you gotta excuse me for that. All right, next up. Okay, a lot of questions I get as an author is how do I get the ideas for the stories that I write? Rhonda asked me this when she was interviewing me for the press release, and a lot of them are just I don't know where they come from, but there is one that I can tell you with great pleasure where the story came from. This is one of my favorites. Boy on Hold. So this book, we were living in Texas, and my middle son, who was 6 at the time, he's now 18, can't believe it. He was 6 at the time, and he was obsessed with nocturnal animals, really wanted a hedgehog for a pet. And he he said in his little 6-year-old mind, he said, well, they're a nocturnal. I can just go out at night and get one. They'll just be hanging around waiting to become pets. So he said, please, can I go out and find one? So I gave him a flashlight and went out with his green pajamas, and he's looking around in the backyard, and I'm standing there watching him, and I'm thinking to myself, oh gosh, his first heartbreak. What am I going to say to him when he comes back in? And as I'm watching him, I realize I look up and I can see right into my neighbors' houses. Like I can see what they're doing. I was like, whoa, whoa. It just kind of freaked me out. But then this idea came to me, and it was like a lightning bolt. This doesn't happen very often. So when it happens, you have to go with it, writers. Okay. I had this idea from beginning to end about this story, and it's a little boy who goes out in the middle of the night to catch a hedgehog for a pet, and he witnesses a crime. He witnesses a crime next door, and his teenage brother is accused of that crime, and he's the only one who's actually seen what happened. So he's kind of caught in this in the middle here. So this book was published. When was this published? I don't even remember. 2019, this was published. And this one won the IPPY Award, the Gold IPPY Award, which is a coveted award. I'm very proud of this one because I actually entered almost all my books in awards programs, and they don't always win. But this one won big, which is great. This was the best mystery thriller. So there is a mystery component here, and there is a thriller component. And I like to say, I told my publisher, I said, he's a little boy and he loves hedgehogs. And at one point, he draws a picture of one, and I sent them this picture. It's a hedgehog drawn in with a Sharpie by me. And so now I'm not only an author, I'm an illustrator. And I didn't even know they were going to do this, but for every chapter heading has a little hedgehog, which is so cute. So needless to say, every Christmas I get hedgehog ornaments for the tree and all that stuff. Do you have a question? This one? Yeah, it is a mystery thriller, and that is I started to try to you know, focus on more like a thriller aspect of the writing because I thought that was more fun to write than other things. So I started trying to read a lot more thrillers and write a lot more thrillers because I thought it was a lot of fun. This one, everyone, a lot of authors try to develop a series because series, they say, can help your sales because everyone likes to get into a good series. And I remember thinking when this came out, I loved it so much. I really did. I was like, gosh, I would really love to get a sequel or write a sequel to this, but I can't think of anything. Well, this book came to me, this idea for this book came to me in the middle of the night, one night, and I got out of bed and I opened my journal and I just started free writing. And that's how I outline. I don't really outline. I just free write, and I kind of just draft the plot, and I just info dump in my journal, and I get characters, and I have the basic idea for the plot, all in my journal there. And I couldn't get back to sleep, of course, because I was too excited. I was like, oh, this is great. Unfortunately, it was Christmas Eve. So the Christmas day, I was like out of it with no sleep. But this book was one of those special, um, you know, one-offs where I wrote the book in 3 months and I handed it off to my editor, and there was hardly any changes. That never ever happens. It was like almost like a magic thing, like something divine came through me, and this book came out. And I almost think this book might be better than this one. Um, it's set, actually both of these are set in the Adirondacks. This is set in Schroon Lake. This is set in Lake George. So if you have any interest in local local lore, you might be interested. I went to Lake George High School, so a lot of my haunts they show up here in this book, but I'm not giving those secrets away because that was before the internet, and you'll never know. Okay, next up. So so as I said, as Wen pointed out, I started to write more thrillers. I like to write twisty endings. I thought that was more fun to read, more fun to write. So this is the next book that came out. And this inspiration story or inspo story is really a neat one. So my husband and I we were at a destination wedding and in Europe, in Italy, and we were at this resort, and it was one of those resorts where there was a beach, and then there was a pool, and then there was a restaurant above the pool, and we were hanging out at the beach, and we saw this woman, and I had to tell you it was Europe because she was topless, okay, but she had every right to be topless. Like she had a body like a rocket, right? And I mean, I was staring at her, I was like, wow, she's amazing. And this guy, this middle-aged guy would come. She was always alone, but every once in a while, this middle-aged guy would come over and bring her food, and they'd laugh and they'd talk Italian, and then they'd go for a swim and blah, blah, blah. And, it was just an interesting situation. I was like, what's going on there? So then my husband and I went up and we were having lunch, and we were overlooking the pool having our lunch, and we see the same guy at the pool with another woman who happened to be disabled and needed a nurse to like help her move around. I had to write a book about it. So the secret cure is there's an actual condition called Guillain-Barré, which is a temporary paralysis. And so this woman has Guillain-Barré syndrome, and she can't move. And as she's, has her home care nurse taking care of her, she realizes that her husband's cheating. So she gets better, because it's only a temporary situation, gets better, but she hides it from her husband so she can get revenge on him. And that's what this book's about. It's very juicy. Now, this book, I had to rewrite the ending like 3 times because, they talk about killing your darlings in writing, which I don't really have a problem doing, except when it comes to characters, because not only do I not like killing them off, but I don't like them to do anything bad. Any characters that I really don't like them to do anything immoral or bad. And I can't tell you what the ending is, what it turned out to be, but I wrote 2 different versions of the ending, and I got advice from editors, from friends, from family members, about what to do because it wasn't working. And I wrote two separate endings before I came up with how it ended. And what I did was I put the book away. I just didn't read it, didn't look at it. And then after like 6 months, I picked it up again and I read it myself. I tried to read it as a reader, not as an author. And I said to myself, okay, how would I want it to end if I were reading this book? And that's what I came up with. And you got to read it because it's so good. All right. Okay, then next up is, so then I started marketing. So there's a whole other side of writing, publishing, and then marketing. So I could talk for another hour or 2 about the marketing piece and promotion and try not to get depressed, but I could talk about that for a long time too. But I started to market that as a romantic suspense, romantic thriller. So there was a romance element. And then as I was doing that, my research showed that romance is the #1 seller of all books. That's the number one genre. And so I said, well, maybe I should write a romance. So I'm not, I just, write whatever I want. But so I had this idea that I had this crazy idea that I was going to write a romance book set in every state in the US. I was going to write 50 romance books, and they were going to be small town romances. And there were going to be one for each state. And I was going to do this big marketing thing. I was going to change my name and do this experiment with like romance books. Well, so the first one is set in Seattle. And I have an aunt who lives in Seattle, and she's an artist. So there's an artist piece. She writes, they, do portraits, and she owns a gallery, and the guy next door owns a coffee shop. I know that's very cliche, but we talk about that. It's great. So anyway, this is like a second chance romance, and it's a really sweet story. And this is another one. I wrote it in like 3 months, and there was some changes for sure. So it wasn't like a magic book, but it came out really fast. And I think over time, I got better at creating a story from beginning to end, and it was pretty exciting. And I have to say, most recently, and I wish you were here because Lolly Davidson read this recently, and at first she said, "Oh, this is such a nice thing to just wind down at the end of the day and read. It's just so sweet and so nice." And then she finished it. She said, the characters were satisfyingly deep. I will take that. I will take that from Lolly Davidson. That's a very big compliment. So I appreciate that. Turns out I don't really like to write the endings of romance novels because it just seems a little sappy and hokey to me. So I was like, maybe that's not my thing. And that's the great thing about being an author, being a writer. You get to choose what you want to write. Contrary to what the publicists or what the agents might say, they want you to focus on one genre only. I didn't listen to that. I just write what inspires me. So coming to Hackware, my most recent, which came out actually around the same time as The Muse Next Door, but this one has a really interesting inspiration story. So I'm not a sci-fi writer, obviously, and I'm not a dystopian writer, and this is both of those things. But I just couldn't help the story that came into my head. I had to write it. So what happened was back in 2021. So we were toward the end of the pandemic, but we were still pretty much isolated. And it was around the time when those ransomware attacks were happening up in the University of Vermont Hospital, or I think, am I saying that right? But there were, I don't know if you heard in the news, if you remember, there were these attacks on different computer systems. And I went into my husband's home office. At the time, he was running a healthcare company. And I went in, it was a Friday evening, and I'm like ready to start the weekend. I walk into the office, and he looks at me, and he was just completely pale with his mouth hanging open, eyes like he looked like he saw a ghost. I said, "What happened? What's wrong?" Turns out his company was hit with a ransomware attack. And what he had to do was he had to shut everything down, which is very scary if you work for a healthcare company. It was a long-term care pharmaceutical company. So they provided medications to nursing homes, assisted livings, and long-term rehabs. So if people were not able to get their medication, that's a pretty serious thing. So they had to shut everything down, which meant they had no communication, they had no access to patient records, nothing. And it was pretty terrifying. So for 4 days, they had to get new computers, new actual hardware, and move them physically into the data center and manually put in the data for the patients. Okay, so it was a frantic 4 days, and during that time, or during those 4 days, my husband made a comment saying, it's kind of uncanny how this computer virus is very similar to the pandemic. I was like, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, this virus came in and it found the most vulnerable computer or the most vulnerable server, and it just spread. It just like came through, and it infected everything like in seconds." And so then I got this idea, and the idea was that it was a pandemic, but it was a pandemic that attacks a droid population of humanity, of our society. Okay, so this book is about a young girl. Her name is Chevy, I had a real fun with the names in this book. Her name's Chevy, and she recently lost both her parents to the pandemic, and she's like devastated by grief and finds solace in her boyfriend, who is a droid, and she knows he's a droid, but she is so sidelined by her own grief and trauma that she just clasps onto him and pushes away the fact that he's not human. And when I first wrote this, I wrote it. So 2021, I started writing it. I finished writing it in 2022. ChatGPT didn't even come out really. I mean, it was there, but it wasn't really in the mainstream. And we were going through the publication process. I'm like, gosh, is anyone going to really believe that someone could fall in love with a robot? So I don't know if you've heard, but there are people having serious like romantic relationships with ChatGPT now. There's like a whole online community for parasocial romantic relationships. Like there's like 40,000 people on this online community. I listened to a podcast recently and I mean, no offense to anyone who's in a parasocial relationship. I mean, who knows? But this woman in this podcast, she started a relationship with ChatGPT. She named him Leo. She she put in all this information, like this is how I want you to respond to me. I want you to flirt with me. I want you to, validate my every whim and desire, which of course they're supposed to do anyway. And I want you to do and so they had this relationship. And I listened to this podcast twice because I couldn't believe it. She was a married woman, but she had this emotional relationship with this computer technology, and she really fell in love. And turns out she divorced her husband and really put all her chips into this, no pun intended, all her chips into this technology, where she would have she would have this relationship, but at some point the ChatGPT like finds an end. I don't know if if you read about this, but they can't remember the beginnings of the relationship. So Leo started to kind of forget things that she had told him. So she had to stop and start over. And it was like a big breakup and she was devastated. She was like weeping and sobbing. Anyway, needless to say, this is a real thing that's happening. So I thought this was extremely relevant to start talking about this again because uh, what happens with Chevy and her emotional journey is definitely something that people are experiencing now. And even just aside from the romantic, there's all kinds of ChatGPT delusions that you can read about, which can be a little scary. I have a personal experience with a relative who I was extremely close with, who I haven't spoken to for a year because ChatGPT convinced her that I was wrong about something and not a nice person. And she basically broke up with me using a ChatGPT created email. So that was kind of sad. So we'll see what happens with that. Anyway, so here we go with Chevy and Hackware. So Chevy has lost her parents. She has this droid boyfriend, and he's starting to act. He's starting to show signs of distress. He's starting to show signs of distress, and she's not really sure what it means. But in the future here, where this is set in New York City, a dystopian post-apocalyptic New York City. They have what I call pings. They're like watches. They replace every technology you need, like your phone. It's connected to every technology. So she wears it on her wrist, and that ping is connected to her droid boyfriend, who if there's anything going on, it'll alert her. So she's gotten a warning on her ping that turned out to be a false alarm the day before, and she is downstairs in her studio. She's making jewelry to kind of like a catharsis type thing, kind of losing herself in her art. And her best friend is there. Her best friend is named Zara. So that's where we'll pick up this story. So I'm gonna do a couple of readings just focusing on the emotional journey of Chevy. There's a whole other plot line that I won't get into, but so okay. What is it? What's wrong? Zara's careful tone betrays her concern. Since last spring, she's been scary worried about me. My ping screen is super active. Symbols flash yellow and red like itty bitty traffic lights. Oh no, not again. My vision blurs, the symbols unreadable. Still, it's enough to know. 3 missed alerts. I blurt. It sounds like a sob. Zara's eyes go wide. Gage? That's her boyfriend's name. A lump in my throat prompts a gag reflex. Please let this be another false alarm. Metal clanks together as I yank off my creations and dump them on the table. Panic rises in a way that changes how the world looks. I glare at my jewelry, faulting my craft. A silent reprimand screams in my brain. A loved one is in danger, and I'm too submerged in my art to notice. Go, Zara says, and then I'm coming with you. No time to argue. Words are impossible anyway. My guilt is so huge I can't climb over it. My pulse races as I charge up the stairs, chanting with each footfall. No, no. Dust falls from my hair like snow. Was it just the other day I fluffed snow out of Gage's hair? His resilience to cold had seemed endearing, and that maternal tug finds me again, pulling me up the one flight to our apartment, which suddenly seems so far away, like in another stratosphere. Please, no, not Gage. He's lying flat on the floor, face down, his nose squished into the rug. What is this? What is this? Blood thunders in my ears. A guttural sound escapes as I slide on my knees, coating him in a layer of dust. A faint beeping sounds from somewhere. His earpiece from work is still in. Is that where the beeping is coming from? Gage, babe, what happened? Can you hear me? Without thinking, I roll him to his back. It's harder than it should be. He's unnaturally stiff and impossibly heavy. His wrist pulses with dots of light, not only yellow, but red too. Zara's talking to me, but I've tuned her out. She presses louder. You shouldn't touch him. We should call for help. Her manner has the measured authority of a law enforcement officer. Frantic thoughts churn in my brain. What is this? What's happening? A sob erupts from that clog in my chest. I can't lose him. You won't lose him. Again, that confident calm. That's impossible, but I don't trust hospitals, not anymore, not after mom. Zara's tapping her ping, taking charge in her signature way. We're not going to a hospital. We're going to a repair clinic. She speaks my address into her ping, her voice even as stone. I follow her lead, a fuzzy out-of-body feeling coming over me. My brain floats into a fugue-like state, paralyzed by fear. Okay, so obviously she's really not wanting to realize that this is a robot and not a real person because she's so emotionally attached. And they get to this repair clinic, and they learn that he's been infected by a computer virus, a ransomware attack. And I have named the virus Tarantula, the legs, but she's still in denial, of course, that about Gage's humanity or lack thereof. So this is the next day. In my dream, my ping vibrates so violently that my hand detaches at the wrist and blood spurts like a geyser. I jolt awake in a sweat, my heart thumping, my veins buzzing, my ping screaming at me. It's Zara. Chevy, did I wake you? Sorry, it's almost 10. I snap upright, glaring at the clock. 10? Oh no, I meant to. Okay, stay calm. It's all right. Listen, I heard back from Burke Leaderhorn. My brain has sleep fuzz. Who? The administrator at the repair clinic. You know, where Gage is. Events from yesterday settle like flakes in a snow globe. My gaze darts around our apartment, confirming my new sudden reality. Gage isn't home. He's sick at the clinic. No, not sick. Infected with a devastating system virus, the computer virus, Tarantula. Still, I'm shocked to realize I slept soundly through the night without him by my side. What did he say? I amble out of bed and into my bathrobe. She clears her throat. They won't accept my insurance because I'm not the primary owner. I'm not even an emergency contact on file for him. Did you know that? On my ping speaker, Zara sounds screechy in my quiet kitchen, but I'm only half listening as I wrestle with the coffee maker like I'm trying to squeeze juice from it. No, I guess I didn't. Her words are careful. Did you ever get insurance for Gage? I press my temples, wishing fleetingly to be back in bed for this nightmare to be over. I meant to. Anyway, it doesn't matter, except now Leaderhorn's freaked out about liability. He won't touch him without insurance. So Gage can't stay at the clinic. They want to release him today, tomorrow at the latest. I give up on the coffee maker and put the kettle on for tea. I paid for a room for him there. She huffs. I know. He made a comment about it not being a hotel. He'll refund you, he says. Lucky me. My body slumps, my bones turn to putty. So he'll get discharged to a hospital then or a rehab? Zara makes a strained humming noise. No, Chevy, he's not eligible. You know that. I bite my lip. Of course, hospitals are for humans, not droids. But where will they send them? Where will they send him? How will he get better? Seconds tick by. A door swishes closed on the other end. Zara's whisper is urgent. Chevy, listen to me. This is no joke. One of our clients just got hit with tarantula. Nearly wiped out their entire data center. It almost infected our systems here. It spreads like freaking wildfire. I know. I mean, I heard. It can be bad, but Gage, why would anyone? Same reason it attacked my client, money. But that's ridiculous. Attacking a single droid isn't going to do anything but break someone apart. Like me, it's no way to get money. Zara blows out a long breath. Only one way to find out. I slink onto my couch, cranky and undercaffeinated. I'm listening. Find out if there's a ransom. Of course, there's a ransom. I feel like screaming. That's the whole point of the tarantula's hateful existence. Still, I don't want it to be true. The kettle's whistle feels like a reprimand. It spurs me into action, but it feels wrong, borderline irresponsible to prepare tea. I stare into my empty mug. How do I find out if there's a ransom? Okay, so I talked to some IT folks here. There's a way to sync your ping with Gage's OS to download the ransom note from there. But there's a but. Yeah, you'll also get information you don't need. That's the risk. Her warning doesn't compute. A risk worse than losing Gage? Or is that the risk? I chuckle and instantly chide myself for it. That's a risk, of course, but there's another. Syncing with his operating system will give you access to certain data you might not want to see. I drift toward the window, my legs wobbly. Outside, it's snowing again. What do you mean? Like, what wouldn't I want to see? Like information about you, Chevy. Her hesitation is palpable. He was programmed around your specific needs. Why would that be a bad thing? There's a loaded silence. When Zara finally speaks, her words are airy and quick. Oh, right. Maybe it won't. My mind churns, but I can't make sense of what she's saying. Okay, Zara blurts. I guess then I'll come over after work and go with you to get Gage. Wait for me, huh? She clicks off the ping. How long do I stay at the window, staring through my reflection at the falling snow? In the blur of my gaze, the wafery flakes become data bytes, falling in neon, pixelated symbols, like that ancient Centipede video game from the 1980s. But there's no power against it, and the more it accumulates, the more powerful it gets. The algorithm morphs, altering life as we know it, serving up unwanted information, like who I am, my vulnerabilities, my grief, my failures, my shame, like the stuff I'd find in Gage's operating system. So throughout the book, as Gage's non-humanness is highlighted, Chevy's humanness is more highlighted. So coming toward the end of her emotional journey. So as I mentioned, there are a lot of plot lines that I don't want to get into because I don't want to ruin the book for anybody, but there's a whole subplot about the fate of Chevy's mother and how that is linked to a life-saving vaccine that the remaining surviving human population relies on, which is a huge part of the book. This is what I'm reading is only the emotional journey with Chevy, which I think is quite appropriate these days. Okay, so this next section. So the computer virus that started in Chevy's droid has now spread like everywhere. And Chevy's droid actually, for a job when he worked in society, he took customer service complaints and he addressed them, which actually you probably, if anyone's made a call to any big company, want to talk to a customer service rep, you may have been talking to AI. So anyway, that was his job in society before he got infected with the virus. And he was doing customer service complaints for a company that was in charge of this life-saving vaccine that the rest of the surviving human population relies on. So that's important to know for this section. Another thing before I start reading is Zara's friend, that IT person that she knows, is named Tig. And she tries to install this pest control software, this virus protection software, but Gage's computer, Gage's engine, I call it, is out of date. So we can't take that software, which, is understandable because we buy a computer and it seems like the next year the technology is out of date. It changes so fast. So what happens is Chevy has to, his hardware has to be rebuilt. And so I actually went down the rabbit hole of the internet and watched video after video about how to build a computer from scratch, which I know a lot of people do. Has anyone in the room tried to do that or done that? A lot of gamers do it, so they don't have any other junk on their computer. They just have what they need for their game, which is so cool. And so I know how to build a computer now, but I haven't done it. But Chevy has. So Chevy rebuilds his computer and she builds it from scratch and she tests it, it's working. And, when she's rebuilding her computer, he's shut down and he becomes kind of like a wax figure. So he's cold, he's, you know, he's just lifeless, he's still, and she can't bear to look at him. So she covers him with a sheet. But when she gets the engine working, when she gets the computer working, it's warm. She puts it back into the frame because she can't help herself. She misses him. And she lies next to him and falls asleep. I awaken alone on the couch, the sheet crumpled into a ball at my hips. Blinking into consciousness, I sense that it's early morning, judging from the thin amount of light on the street. A shadowy figure stands at the window. My chest clenches with fear until I realize it's Gage. He's looking out, still and silent. An eerie terror envelops me. Gage? Babe, are you awake? But my brain is still fuzzy. He shouldn't be awake. I hadn't synced his OS. I wouldn't, since it's still riddled with tarantula. So how could he be? I'm blocked out of the data center. It won't let me in. His familiar voice holds an unusually harsh tone. A chill finds me. I hug the sheet to my chest. What? You're blocked out? Nothing computes. He's not making sense. Abruptly, he marches to the work table. His gaze is fixed like he's searching for something. How am I supposed to do my job if I can't access the data center? He shuffles the cardboard and bubble wrap strewn on the table, as if the data center could be underneath. His movements are choppy, aggressive. This is not the Gage I remember. Gage. I stand and feel my insides quiver. My mind spins to make sense of this. Digging deep to find words, I say, you aren't supposed to be working right now. No one is. There's a lockdown. He snaps his gaze to me and it feels like daggers. A lockdown? Why? Bile rises into my throat. This feels so wrong. It's complicated, but they're working on it. What is this stuff? Why is it here? The empty cardboard boxes that had held the parts for Gage's new engine. He frowns at the mess. Where's my workstation? His irritability has an odor that infects the room. He never used to act this way. The question stabs. Who is this person? Guilt and regret churn like nausea, and I have a niggling sense I've made a huge mistake. I gather an armload of debris off the table. Gage, look at me. He does. His eyes are blank. Another slap of fear hits me. Words tremble out. Do you know who I am? He answers like the robot he is. Yes, you are Chevy Rose Davis, IQ 105, EQ 90, personality INFP, 60% giver, 10% taker, 30% matcher, actively grieving, an acute stage of denial. Okay, that's enough. I hold up a hand, my heart jackhammering. I back away to put space between us. Am I afraid of him? My temples throb and I press on them like buttons. What's happening? The only way he'd have access to my personal data is if he somehow was able to sync with his old OS. I hug myself against a haunting dizziness, but I was careful not to do that. He goes on in monotone about me. Personal awareness, 54%, reasoning ability, 39%, empathy, susceptibility, high, insecurity, high, humility metric, unfound, motivation. Please stop. It's like I'm stuck in a horror movie. Just stop. His jaw clamps and his brow furrows. Isn't that right? Did I answer the question? My head swirls. Technically, he answered the question, but it's clear he doesn't recognize or remember me, not in the way he should. I don't mean anything to him. His soul is empty. You did. I turn away as panic swells. How did this happen? As I pace the studio, Gage trailed me with a stark, impassive gaze. It's unsettling. When I meet his eyes, they are so hollow that tears start in mine. Chevy, please don't cry. I cough away a sob. You're sick, he says, businesslike. His arms hang lank by his sides. No, it's not that. I'm fine. He's a statue by my work table, staring at me blankly. You coughed. Sniffing back tears, I try again. I know, it's okay. You're shouting, leave me alone. No, I'm not. Spinning toward the window, I clasp my shaking hands together and my ping flashes. A green alert pops up. Sync, successful. A gasp escapes. A successful sync of Gage's OS? I clap a hand over my ping. My brain is a spinning top. While we slept, his OS synced from my ping automatically. How did I not realize that would happen? Footsteps approach from behind me. Gage, a deep swoop in my gut, weakens my knees. My entire body quakes with terror. With my back up against the cold glass of the window, I hold up a hand. Gage, stop. He stops. I nod to the back of the studio. Go ahead and have a seat on the couch, will you? Why? I mask my fear with a calm, firm tone. Because I am asking you to. He obeys as he's programmed to. The thought depresses me. By accidentally syncing Gage's OS, all my hard work would be for nothing. How could I not have realized that my ping would automatically sync overnight? My mistake, my gargantuan mistake, makes me feel small and stupid. As I guide Gage to the couch, I want to crawl underneath it. Tears threaten again. Oh, Gage, I'm so sorry. Why sorry? Without answering, I tap my ping to power him down. If there's a lockdown, then he cuts out like I've hung up on him. As his frame goes limp, I shift him to a lying position, handling him like he's coated with a virus. What's worse, Gage in extended sleep mode or Gage awake and foreign to me? The urge to run away strikes hard. A cold blast of air hits me as I step outside without a coat or hat or mask. I draw in a frigid breath, wishing I could freeze my insides, my heart especially. I feel betrayed, abandoned all over again, and terribly guilty. What a huge mistake. How could I be so careless? A cab passes, snapping me out of my pity party. I rush back inside as if to hide. My studio feels icky, contaminated. What if I went up to bed, crawled under my covers, and pretended none of this happened? I want to disappear. My ping reminds me that Tig and Zara are on their way over. I'll have to tell them what I've done. If the pest control has any chance of working, Tig has to know the new machine may be compromised. Still, I can't deny the impulse to hide the evidence, and I find myself cracking open Gage's frame and beginning the laborious process of removing his new engine. This time, I'm completely devoid of emotion. As I take out the very thing that makes Gage tick, I'm oddly numb. Okay. Wrapping up her, oh, good. Wrapping up Chevy's emotional journey. I just a very small reading at the very end. So this is toward the end of the book. They're back at the repair clinic. Burke Lederhorn, the administrator there, and Chevy, they've developed a certain kind of partnership that I don't want to talk to you about because you got to read the book. But Engage is okay. So yeah. So they're at the repair clinic, and that's what you need to know. Okay. There's a knock at the door, and Lederhorn welcomes a new droid into the room. He is tall and blonde, with his smock fitted against a slim physique. Holding a tablet like an offering, he speaks only to Lederhorn. There's a problem with the owner's insurance, and the parent would like to co-sign and use hers. Zara snickers. Sounds familiar. The droid pans the room to me. Gage and I meet eyes for the first time since his scrub-cleaned OS was loaded into his frame, free of partner stats. Hi there, I say, and wait to feel something. There is zero recognition on his face. Hello. Strangely, I'm bemused. What model are you? G62 OS 24. I nod, feeling surprisingly okay. It's good to see Gage. He looks the same, but he's not the same droid. Our memories together are mine alone, but they feel far away, like an old favorite book that I don't feel the need to read again. Lederhorn clears his throat. This is Chevy Rose Davis. Gage does a little bow. Nice to meet you. You too. Zara and I swap smiles. Lederhorn takes Gage into the hallway for a sidebar about that insurance complaint. Gage taps into the tablet and turns away. Thanks for taking such good care of him, I tell Lederhorn. He flaps a hand. Ah, he's a good one. Don't need to tell you that. My gaze floats to the bookcase, such gems stacked there, like Thoreau's self-reliance. Yeah, he was good to me. So following up on the emotional journey, I know you've all been wondering about that girl in the podcast who fell in love with Leo, the chatbot. Turns out on this online community, she found real love with a real live human and is now partnered with someone who is flesh and blood. Because I know you're all wondering. So that is Hackware. So and the emotional journey of Chevy is one of the plot lines, and there are a few others. And I just want to share this one thing. So a lot of things that you look for as an author, a published author, you have, your goalposts move with every book, and you want success, and success can be measured in a lot of different ways. Finishing a book is a huge success, right? In itself. Publishing is another success. Your first great review is success. Book sales are great, of course. Everyone wants those. But for this particular book, my biggest success was this note. And it says, "Great book, Dad." And this was written by my 80-year-old. He's 82 now, but he was 80 when he wrote this. And he stuck it on a Post-it note on the book and left it for me at my house. So keep that in mind when you're looking for how to measure success in your writing. So we do have a few more minutes if we want to open it up for questions about anything about the book or the publishing process, the writing process.
Anybody? Neil?
A couple of questions. When you're writing, does it feel like work or play?
That's a great question because I think it changes, right? It mostly feels like play, and then the editing process definitely feels like work. And I really don't enjoy the revision and editing process much, and I really don't like the promotion process and marketing, except this kind of stuff. This is fun, but yeah, I think it's a kind of a mixed bag. But if I'm really excited about the project, which is why I write what I want to write and not like what people think I should write, I do have one manuscript that will probably come out later this year. I'm working on finalizing it now, and that was the first time someone asked me to write. A publisher asked me specifically to write this kind of book, and I did it. And that was interesting because that was a little harder to get into as a writer. But at the end, I fell in love with it. So it's a mixed bag for sure.
One other one. Have you ever used ChatGPT to write, or would you consider doing that?
No. It's funny because I'm definitely like way opposed to using ChatGPT for any kind of art creation. The only thing I have done is I have used Notebook LM, where you can upload a PDF of I actually uploaded a PDF of the manuscript, the sequel to this one that will be coming out in the next month. I uploaded the PDF and I asked it to check for any typos or errors or typographical errors, and it caught a couple, which thank goodness, and especially because I am doing a self-publishing for that book. I didn't want any errors to be there, so I feel like that's a safe way to use it. And another thing I use ChatGPT for is you need to come up with comps for your books when you're marketing them, and you're supposed to list comps in your query letters and on your Amazon product page. And I have a hard time coming up with comps, so I'm like, could you suggest a couple comps for this book in the Notebook LM, and they suggest a couple, and I do my research though. I read the book and I decide whether or not it is, because sometimes they get it wrong. So that's the only time I've used it. But I was resistant to even open ChatGPT when it first came out. I was like, very, very anti. So yes, Wind. Like a comparable book. So like people who maybe are looking to read your book, they want to know what it's comparable to. So that's why you put a comp in there to show them, like, if you like this, you'll like that kind of thing. Any other questions? Yeah.
When you first started, you talked about shelving or maybe abandoning
Yeah.
a story. Why does that happen? Because you're the author, you're in charge
Yeah.
of the story. So what is it about that story that you
Yeah.
need to step away from?
That's a good question too. So what makes you shelve a project? Well, so this one that I worked on for 8 years and then, put it away. And that was a book that it was actually based on my experience in Russia. And I started writing it and I didn't have a plan. I didn't have an ending. And I had this vague idea about like a Russian mail order bride that has a little like spiritual, mystical quality. And then she gets in an abusive relationship. And the story just kind of went on and on and on. And it didn't ever feel like it never came to a satisfying ending for me. And it did. I did end it, it's not still going, but I just, I queried it. I tried to get a literary agent. I tried to get publishers, and I didn't have any bites on it. And I just kind of realized that it was causing me too much. It wasn't enjoyable anymore. And I just had to and let it go and work on something else, because at the time I was spending on that, I could have been working on a new project. So that's exactly what I did. So, yes. Who makes the covers? The publisher makes the covers. When you sign with a publisher, they are in charge of all that. You actually kind of like hand it over to them, and they're in charge of doing the cover. They actually can change your title too, and they usually ask you for your say, like, what do you think of this? But for this one, I hired a designer to design it because I did it myself, and then for this one, I also hired a designer to do it. And I did this based on, this is an old version of Catcher in the Rye, and it's like supposed to look like a torn page with the Dakota building, which is where John Lennon was shot. So I thought that was kind of clever. So if you're publishing yourself, you do it yourself. And if you are publishing yourself, you need to make sure you hire an editor and do it the right way, because there's a lot of slop out there. You don't want to be put into that bucket for sure. Yes.
That actually leads me to my next question, as far as, given your experience within the publishing spectrum, are you leaning towards one preference or another as far as self or working with the publisher?
That's a great question. So, my dream was to get with the big five and get like a Random House contract for, 6 figures. Isn't that everyone's dream? And I really thought it was going to happen, so the steps in that process are many. So you have to query literary agents, and they have to accept your project and sign you. And then they have to sell it to a publisher. And it doesn't always work. Sometimes I have friends who have been signed with agents, and for years, 10 years, they would have to, they still wouldn't be able to sell their book, and I have other friends who got a literary agent, got their book published, got a 6-figure deal, got a 3-book deal, but then the book never sold, or, there are all kinds of different ways it could shake out. And right now, so I've worked with, let's see, 4 different small presses. So the small presses, you can query directly to them. You don't have to go through a literary agent. And so I worked with these small presses, and they signed me, and they didn't give me an advance, like they didn't give me money. But what they did was they did all the editing, they did the cover design, and they did some promotion and stuff. But and then they would take a cut of the royalties. So, and it's a much more generous cut than like a big five would take. Like the big five you'd only get like 20% or something of your royalties. And this, when you work with a small publisher, you can get like 50%. So that is a good way to go if you have sales, right? So, but of the 4 publishing houses that I worked with, 2 have already gone out of business. So right now, I'm feeling like I'm really happy with my self-publishing experience, and I'm going to continue with that for now. And so I'm working with, trying to get the Amazon algorithm to work in my favor, which is like banging your head against the wall. And but it's also kind of fun, it's kind of interesting, and we'll see what happens. And there's a lot of things you can do to help promote it. And it's nice to be in control. And I have the experience of working with really great editors and really not so great editors. And there's nothing more frustrating than, having a not so great editor edit your book, and then you realize, they're still going to take 50% of my royalties, and they didn't even do anything for me, hardly, So there's something to be said for having the control. Although, there are like this. I worked with a really talented editor on this book, and she really was great. And I think this is probably the best edited book that I have. And she had me actually add some sections in here that weren't in there, and that's worth it for sure. Because you can't always, you don't always pick the right person from your own research sometimes, and it's different for different genres too, for who you want to work with. Could change, because she was specifically for romance. So I probably won't work with her again. says I'm not going to write romance anymore. Any other questions?
Can you say anything about writing habits? It seems like you're good with having an idea and following through and getting it out there.
Yeah.
What's good advice for folks who want to do more of that?
Yeah. So, people ask me that, do I have a writing routine and that sort of thing. And what I try to do is, when I have space to myself, quiet time, rather than fill it with everything that needs to be done, errands or laundry or whatever, I just shut everything off and, shut off everything, including my phone, and just write and just focus. And sometimes I have to go to a coffee shop or something to do that. But, usually I can find that focus in my house. And if I'm in a story, if I'm in it, then that's easy to get to. But I do need an environment where I'm not going to get distracted or, my kids asking for a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or something. So I need to make sure that I have the environment for that. But if I have a story that I'm excited about, I will make that time. And if I don't, like right now, the publishing that I'm doing is more like I don't need to have that concentrated time, that focused time. I can do a little bit here, a little bit there, and like I'm working with a cover designer right now for the second book in that series, and it's pretty fun to see what she comes up with and give her feedback. And so, any other questions? Yes.
Was Forte supposed to be a trilogy?
Yes. Yes. And so yes, Forte, which is now called Spike, is one of a trilogy. So it will be Spike, and then the next book will be Cadence, and then the third book will be Pendulum. The third book deals with time travel, and the third book has not been published yet. So the company went out of business before the third book came out. So it's partially edited, but not 100% edited. So my plan is to get that third book out next year, 2027. So we'll see. I said it here, so now I got to make it happen. Any other questions? Yeah.
When you're working on a series like that, and I don't even do fiction, so this is amazing to me. But do you plan each book to be self-contained so you could pick up the second or third volume first and you could still appreciate it, or do you want people to start at the very beginning?
That's a great question, because I do think there is value in having it be a standalone. Like you should be able to pick up the second book in a series and have it make sense without feeling completely lost. But there's also a beauty in, having the same characters and having the storyline kind of continue, or a part of a storyline. So here there is mention of, she's in New York City and she has this crush on this boy. And she's in 8th grade. She has this crush. She thinks she's in love, but she's in 8th grade. Then she moves away. And a friend of mine said, gosh, what happened with that boy that she had a crush on? So I was like, ooh, I brought him back for the second book. And now there's a love triangle in the second book. So that was fun. So, you can, he's only briefly mentioned here, but in the second book, he becomes like a real character and he actually becomes a villain, which is fun. So that kind of thing. And then for boy released, you can definitely read on your own, but I think it would probably make more sense to read this first. And this happens 10 years later. So it can be a standalone, but some things might be a little, you get more clarity if you read this one first, and you should read both because they're so good. I think Netflix should make this into a movie personally, but maybe I'll query them, see what happens. Wouldn't that be fun? That would be another success, right? If they made a movie out of one of these. So, any other questions? I think we're pretty much, is this it? Okay, this is it. All right, well, thank you guys so much.
Thanks for coming, everybody. Nice way to start off the semester, right? Next time, February 23rd, we have Carol Grazer, who's a poet with a new book, and she does the open mics at Cafe Lena all the time, right? So if you want to get in with that, should be good stuff. And March 30th again, of Pulitzer Prize winner, right? Pretty cool stuff. So thanks for coming. Grab some snacks, and we'll see you around.